Welcome back. Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate has accused world leaders of destroying the planet with their inaction. Nakate made the remark at a COP26 climate summit rally.
Global leaders are destroying the planet with their lack of action. That's the message from Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate.
Thank you for coming out here.
She was speaking at a rally in Glasgow, where the COP26 summit is being held, on Friday.
How many more of these should they hold until they realize that their inactions are destroying the planet? We are seeing the impacts of the climate crisis. I come from Kampala, Uganda, a country that has one of the fastest changing climates in the world.
Nakate called for climate justice and said people from the most affected areas should be listened to. She warned that Africans are suffering the most brutal impacts of the climate crisis, even though the continent is only historically responsible for 3% of global emissions.
There is food to eat and water to drink.
But the campaigner also painted a picture of a brighter future.
Once flooded places will dry and bloom again. There is triumph in the city because the power of the people finally won. The world is green again. Nature has been restored. The planet and creation is respected. Another world is necessary. Another world is possible. And this is just a glimpse of it.
The main aim of the UN summit is to keep alive a target of capping global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But youth climate activists are sceptical about genuine political will. Campaigners and pressure groups have been underwhelmed by commitments made during the conference's first week, many of which are voluntary or set deadlines decades away.
Well, to talk to us about this, Desmond D'Sa is the coordinator of the environmental justice organization South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, the SDCEA. Mr. D'Sa, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
Good evening and good evening to the listeners.
Mr. D'Sa, what has been your impression of the COP26 climate summit? I mean, in terms of all participants, recommitting to net zero emissions by 2050 and as well as big reductions by 2030.
I must say that since 1992, we heard the same rhetoric by all the government leaders of the world who gather at these summits, and all they do is talk and tap one another on their back and agree that, you know what, business must continue as usual because they've been captured by the huge polluting corporations who created the climate crisis. We've seen it so often, and we've seen it in Durban in 2011, that they came here and all they done was pass by Durban and made no decisions. And even the minimum commitments they made was never carried out. We went to Copenhagen in 2000 we done the same thing, the very same thing. And there as well, those commitments were made and nothing happened. In Paris, there was hope. They gave everybody hope in the world. And we've seen that in 2018, the firebomb rained down in KZN and 71 of the poorest of the poor people were killed. So it's always poor people that will suffer the burden of the climate crisis. And the rich, like the likes of Virgin Active, the CEO of Virgin Active, as well as Elon Musk, they will fly up into the air and try and escape into the moon. But they know they will always come down. You have to come back. So the crisis is upon us. Floods are all over the show. We've had floods in South Africa. We have floods all over the world, even in the rich states in the US, where the biggest polluter is based. Huge hurricanes have continued to affect the country, especially in the deep south, where the oil industry is the worst. So we cannot say, and I agree totally with the comrade from Uganda, that Africa is going to bear the brunt of it, even though we are not responsible for all these polluting industries. And the countries that are responsible continue to plunder, continue to mine, continue to come to Africa and take away the resources, but leave nothing in return. And in South Africa, we know too well about activists that have been killed in mining communities, in Somkele, Mafikile, Shangazi, the Australian mining company is responsible for her death because they did not listen to the community. They went in there, forced the people, destroyed the water, their common, destroyed the land. People are suffering. They have to walk for miles to get water. So the crisis is here already. People already on the ground, especially the poor in the rural areas, in the mining communities, are already impacted upon. No, nothing will happen at Glasgow. We certainly believe that the world leaders are going to come back, pat themselves on the back, cut a deal that's not binding, that's not secured, and continue with mining of coal, continue with oil and gas. Because if they were genuine about this, and yeah, I talk about the South African government, they could have stopped the oil and gas being explored in our ocean. They should have stopped the mining in Somkela and put an end to the devastation that they want to create in the Eastern Cape, where the Madiba crisis, the leadership is in hiding because they are threatened to be killed. If our governments are really serious, now is the time. Our children are not going to wait any longer. It's their future. I wonder how these leaders sleep at night when they realize that the future of their own children is being compromised by the deals that they're making behind closed doors. The COPs will never benefit ordinary people. All it does is bring people together to agree on a certain position, which means that mining of oil and gas, of the release of greenhouse gas emissions, is going to continue unless we as people start rising up, blocking the ports, blocking the escape route when they're going to these UN conferences at the airports, and blocking them even to come back and leaving these where they have these international events, because they need to know.
Mr. D'Sa, you're seemingly punching holes at the COP26 summit. I mean, you're seemingly punching holes at this COP26 summit, and you've just said that, we've been bombarded with jargon and rhetoric for all these years by the powers that be and the leaders, of these initiatives around climate change. So what is your expectation of these leaders that they should do? What is it that they should do in terms of ensuring that, the climate change issue is addressed effectively?
Well, before they leave their home countries, we should put an end to the oil and gas exploration and all the mining. So when they get there, they sign binding agreements to say no country in the world will there be any mining, new mines and investments and any coal development. And then move to a just transition that can create millions of jobs. We need to have socially owned renewable energy that will upskill people, will create millions of jobs, will redistribute the wealth in those communities where labor is sourced. So people will own the mechanisms, will own the factories and create jobs and feed their families. The current crisis now is the opposite. It's only creating a few jobs. It's going to destroy the climate, the environment. It's going to have impact on people's health. But more critically, it's not going to create jobs. And the poorest of the poor are being affected. So I'm saying the Paris Agreement ain't going to work. It's not going to work because they're sending their officials to go there and talk about things. But by the time the presidents come there, all they're doing is agreeing to some text where the wealthy countries of the world continue to dominate and don't want to be held responsible for all the destruction and the plunder and the taking of the resources and the impact of the climate crisis on the poor countries of Africa and the islands. And I think we need to stand together. We asked that. We did say in 2011, we asked the president of South Africa, stand with Africa. And what happened? The Africans were betrayed. We need to stand together as an African continent and to ensure that an injury to one is an injury to all, so that no deals that are made in Glasgow can come back and affect every one of us on the continent. And we need that our country leadership needs to have the guts to stand up and be counted amongst the people who want the change that we are seeking. It can't be business as usual. The climate won't allow it.
The biggest culprits is the coal and the fossil fuels, which is largely driven by the highly industrialized nations and as well as some economies in the emerging markets. So do you think that the emerging market economies and these industrialized nations are ready for a transition from coal to cleaner energy?
These things can be done overnight. It's been proven in Africa. It's been proven right here in South Africa. You can put up a wind farm. You can put up a renewable energy farm overnight, practically. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You can generate a lot of energy that can supply the whole of the country, can supply energy to the poorest of the poor who have been denied access to energy, even though we built the third and fourth biggest coal-fired power station in the world, Mujipi and Kusile, on the premise that this will supply energy to the majority of poor people in this country. It's never happened. The majority of people in Soweto have all the electricity cut off. The majority of people in informal settlement, all of them do not have access to the grid. So why do we want to go with coal and all that there when you can put up renewable energy tomorrow and people can gain access and off the grid? And that will mean that we are all equal in this country, that everybody has the right to access water, to access energy, and live in a better life. That has not happened in Africa. The vast majority of people on the continent are deprived, are energy poor, meaning that they are deprived of energy. All this energy is going to the big companies, the aluminium smelters like BHP Billiton, that get energy for free, ship their profits all over to Melbourne in Australia or in the US or even in London. Nothing benefits people in the countries where they are mining and taking all these resources. The only thing that you see is contaminated, poisoned water. You have to swim in poisoned ocean. You have to swim in the poisoned rivers. But more critically, even the ground is contaminated. And I've seen it in Matuba. I've gone up there. I'm working over there. I've seen it in Tunzini, in KZN, where people are really suffering, where people only have to collect water once a week, that the mining companies has the audacity to bring water to the community only on a Tuesday in big plastic drums that are full of chemicals, because they can't get water that they used to get. The underground water is all polluted with high levels of mercury, cyanide, and heavy metals that they can't drink.
The sense that I'm getting from you and other climate activists, Mr. D'Sa, is that the governments and the powers that be have failed the world, have failed nations when it comes to climate change. So what should we as individuals do to change the current status quo?
Well, we have to step aside. You know, the old age people must step aside and allow the young people to take ownership and responsibility, because their future is being compromised here. Their future has been plundered. Their future has been cut very short. So they're not going to live up to a life of accessing all these things, and they're going to have to suffer and go through all the pain and the different weather patterns that you have to experience. So the young people need to take ownership. Then we're going to see change. We're going to have to make sure that our young people understand that change will come within their hands. And more importantly, all those programs that have been forced down our throat from the Western countries and from other developing countries would not work for the continent. We have to find our own way, our own industry, our own way of life to make it work for us as Africans. And we have to work together to make that work, because that's the only way. Our unity, our diversity can make it work in a way that will provide a better life for each and every one of us in this world, in this continent, and in the world. And we are not enjoying that there. The vast majority of people have been oppressed because the corporations dominate, and the governments of the world follow the corporations and protect the corporations, but don't protect the people. And that's why we have high levels of cancer and asthma and leukemia and other illnesses that come from those high levels of the greenhouse gas emissions that ESCOM, that SASL, and all these big corporations are directly responsible. They should be held accountable. There's supposed to be a reparation fund. These corporations must be held accountable to pay back to the people of this country and other parts of the world where they have failed, where they've taken the resources and destroyed the land, destroyed the water. That is the only way we're going to get back to normality. That's the only way where we can create a world where we are all equal, where we all enjoy the same privileges.
We are out of time, unfortunately, Mr. D'Sa. We have to leave it. Thank you so much for your thoughts and for your reflections on this matter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and thanks to the listeners.
All right, thank you. That was Desmond D'Sa. He's the coordinator of the environmental justice organization, South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, the SDCEA. This is The Globe on SABC News. We take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment.